We're up to session number 2 of our Hamfest program today, and we're going to get an update from the ARRL, most specifically Mr. Tom Abernathy, the ARRL Atlantic Division Director, Bob Flamingo. I do it every time. Sorry, Bob. Familio, yes, thank you. Thank you, appreciate that. K3RF, who's the Vice Director, and then Tom Preeser, there's Tom, who is our Section Manager. So I'm happy to turn it over now to Tom.
Thank you, Bob. Yeah, good morning. I am Tom Abernathy, W3TOM. I'm the Atlantic Division Director, and I represent you along with Bob Familio, K3RF, on the board level for the league. But before we get started, I got some serious business here. Would you use the microphone, sir? I certainly will. I'd be happy to, but I'd prefer to walk around, and I'd prefer to walk down through the aisles. But Bob, I wonder if you'd, both Bobs, come on up.
Present, Tom?
Yeah.
Okay. Does it say Ron? Does it not? Yeah.
You recognize that?
I recognize that, because
I
I got
did.
a letter and I figured they cost reduced it out.
Okay, we're very excited this morning to present Bob Black with a very special award. He wrote an article in the July QST, and of course it was lightning protection and grounding project at W2 MMD. Anybody heard that call sign? Yes. Yeah, they had quite an adventure here, and we're very lucky to have folks like Bob that will take their skills and expertise and take time to actually take and document things and share it with the amateur radio community so we're all better for it. And that particular July issue had his article highlighted along with pictures, and that was voted the best of the July issue of QST. So I'd like to present a plaque to you, Bob. I'm sorry.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you much. Okay, let's talk turkey here a little bit. So what does a director do? Who is a director? Who's a vice director? The ARRL is your membership organization. We work for you. The ARRL is composed of 15 divisions around the country, and each of those divisions has a director. And we're currently in the Atlantic Division. The Atlantic Division runs from Washington, D.C. and Maryland, the Potomac River, up to northern New York and the Canadian line. And it encompasses 7 ARRL sections. And, of course, southern New Jersey is one of those sections. So it keeps us hopping pretty good. We meet twice a year. The board meets twice a year, once in January, once in July. And we meet and we develop policy that the CEO is responsible, the chief executive officer is responsible for carrying out with a staff of about 87 up in Newington, Connecticut, our headquarters. But as we talk about headquarters, the ivory tower, that's where it all happens, right? No. Who is the ARRL? You're sitting with them right here. This is the ARRL. This is what makes it all happen. This is what makes amateur radio happen. It's really neat to be a part of it. Typically from April to about November, I have one free weekend that's available. I'm traveling around and about. I had a chance a couple weeks ago to get up. This is the Southern New Jersey Section Convention. A couple weeks ago, I was up in northern New York in the Adirondack Mountains for the Northern New York Section Convention. And I was also had a chance to do field day up there. Each year I pick a section of the division to participate in field day. It's too large with 7 sections. It's just too large to try to do everything in one weekend. But I traveled almost 1,700 miles over field day weekend visiting field day sites. And Bob does the same thing. It's just it keeps us busy, it keeps us rolling. Bob and I have been an excellent team for a number of years. We have interesting expertise that we apply to everything. So I wanted to mention that the Board of Directors operates with several standing committees. We have the PSC, the Program and Services Committee, that up until recently handled anything that touched the member. Today they're handling mostly radio sport, DXCC, and that sort of thing. And a spinoff here a short time ago was the Emergency Communications Clubs and Field Services Subcommittee that was founded. And I'm pleased to serve on that committee. Did I get it close, Bob? Okay. This committee is very important. We took those areas out of the PSC, and we're handling those separately. We're working with clubs right now to develop new club benefits, to define how the ARRL can work with clubs to make amateur radio better. We're working with a field organization right now. We're reorganizing some of the field organization currently. And we have subcommittees within the subcommittee, and each of these are working on these areas. And also, very importantly, we're redeveloping ARRL, Amateur Radio Emergency Service, and the National Traffic System, NTS. We're developing ARRL 2.0 and make it more relevant to this day and age and for the needs of the people we serve, the entities that we serve. So there's a lot going on. There's a lot happening. We also have another committee that's the Executive Committee. I mentioned we have 2 board meetings a year, one in January, one in July. And between those meetings, the Executive Committee does all the policy development, and they work in conjunction with the actual Board of Directors, all 15 directors and 15 vice directors, to develop the policy. And we meet monthly, and I say we because I'm privileged to serve on that committee. You're elected to the committee by your fellow peers. Your directors elect you, and I've served on it for several years, and there's a lot going on. We handle FCC legislation, and one of the neat things I also serve on is the ARRL's Legislative and Advocacy Committee, and we work on legislation, some FCC things. We walk the halls of Congress this coming week, starting on Tuesday. I'll be back in the Capitol, walking the halls of Congress. We've got meetings set up about every hour and a half with congresspersons and both senators and representatives, congressional representatives in Congress. We'll also be meeting with some law firms, and we work with a hired gun, our lobbyist, on things. Right now we're working on the HOA. Maybe Bob, in a few, you can mention a little bit about the HOA, the current HOA proposed legislation we're working on. We're looking forward to pushing it through Congress. And it's been a tough sled in the congressional and legislative and in the FCC here the last couple years with the virus. It's amazing that everything's sort of been put on the sidelines until right now, and things are opening back up. Currently with the FCC, we have a lot of rulemaking that has been proposed. Some of it we've been requested for opinions, for input on it, and it's just sat there and languished. Unfortunately, at the FCC, there's very few hams left. At one time, Wireless Bureau had hams that ran it and were involved in the rulemaking. Today, there's virtually nobody. So what's the big lick right now in the FCC? Cellular. They have 5G auctions and that sort of thing. You know, they're already working on working groups with 6G. And what do cell phone systems need? Spectrum. Yes, spectrum management. And we've been very lucky to hold on to what we have. We've worked very hard behind the scenes. We work along with our legal counsel our communications counsel, Dave Siddell, K3ZR. He is spectacular. He worked on Capitol Hill in congressional offices. He worked at the FCC. 2 years ago, just as the virus struck, we had an opportunity, a group of us went to the FCC for an entire day in Washington, D.C. headquarters. And what was really neat was we were able to set up meetings and meet with all the key individuals that were responsible for the rulemaking that we have in the hopper. And we're talking about things that have been in the hopper 5 to 7 years now. And we wanted to shake them loose and get them on the docket and have things come to fruition for us. And as we met with these different chiefs and division directors at the FCC, it was amazing. Dave Seidel, our representative, our legal counsel, our communications counsel, would sit there in a meeting with these individuals and their staff and look across the table and say, I know what you're going through. I sat in that chair for 4 years, and he could talk their language. And we came up with an agreement that they were going to move things forward. And this is a whole multitude of really important issues for amateur radio. And that was in October. And December, the FCC offered an early out. And you can't imagine. Virtually every one of these individuals took the early out and retired just as the virus hit. So we've pretty much been stymied, and things have been sitting still. We've had congressional representatives that have gone after the new chairwoman of the FCC requesting action. So far, we haven't had a response. We're still working on it. In fact, we'll be meeting a senator this coming week. We'll meet a senator and discuss where we go from here. So there's a lot going on behind the scenes for you, the member, to make it happen. I want to mention a few benefits. One of the exciting things we were able to do, it came out of the Delaware Valley QCWA Chapter 5. I got a call one day a number of years ago from a gentleman who had just come back from a luncheon. And a lot of the folks, of course, most of the folks QCWA, you have to be a amateur radio licensed for 25 years, minimum 25 years to join the Quarter Century Wireless Association. So when you go to a luncheon, a lot of them look like me, and I'm probably the youngest. And he mentioned the fact that they had a discussion about life memberships of the American Radio Relay League, and the fact that it's 25 years times the current dues structure. And that's a significant amount. It's over $1,200 currently to become a life member. And being in their 80s and some in their 90s, mathematically, it just didn't make sense to spend that kind of money to become a life member. And they always wanted to be a life member, but they couldn't afford it. But now they had a little cash. And so what can we do about that? And I had a chance to take that to the executive committee. We discussed it. It went to another subcommittee we had called ANF, the Accounting and Finance Committee. They handle all the HR and money for the league. They handle the business side of the league. And we discussed it, and they said, hey, why don't you put together a proposal and see what you can come up with. And these folks from Chapter 5, the Delaware Valley QCWA chapter, suggested maybe at age 70 or 65, there'd be a reduced fee for life memberships. So I came back with a proposal. Marty Wall, a former vice director from out in California, had done some work. He's very sharp with the pencil and figures. And I took his study and modified it a little bit and presented it to the ANF committee. And basically, the way I worked it out was, at age 26, you start to get a slight reduction until you worked your way all the way up, this is for life membership, to 100. And if you were lived to be 100 years old, life membership was free. Yeah. Well, that's what the ANF said. Yeah. The executive committee, they say, what? You know, they laughed and clapped. And, well, we went back to the drawing board. And we negotiated for a year and a half, almost 2 years. And that's the way it works. There's no single director that has the secret of everything. You've got to compromise with 14 other directors. You got to work together. You come from different geographical areas, different interests in the amateur radio service, the hobby, and you got to work together. So we work together to come up with things. And of course, we've also have to work with the bean counters at the league. You know, does this make sense financially? You don't want to put yourself in a hole. And if you take a look at a lot of organizations, they have these life membership drives for 6 months. And they get a big slug of money to build a building or to take care of some financial need. They take and spend the money, and then what happens? We've got thousands of life members. We have an escrow account that the money is going into. It's invested, and every year we withdraw just enough to maintain the life members. So we can perpetually carry on for many, many years our life memberships. So we're very careful with that. And what we came up with was a compromise. And at age 70 and above, and at that time you had to have a 25-year ARRL membership associated with it, you could purchase a life membership for half price. And that's what we worked out. That's what was approved. They went through the A&F committee, went to the full board of directors at a meeting, was approved. Personally, I didn't want to see the 25-year requirement. I had people that came to me said, "Hey, I'm 65. I've only been an ARRL member for 5 years. I just became a ham, and I can't get a membership." So sure enough, January a year ago, or January this year, we took out the 25-year requirement. So anybody 70 and over can purchase a life membership for $750. So it's really kind of neat. It's kind of neat to be able to provide that to the membership, a neat benefit. We have RF exposure rules are in effect. You're supposed to conduct a RF exposure study on your station. You can go to the ARRL website and run your station parameters through it, and it'll tell you the situation if you're safe to operate. You do not have to turn the output of the study into the FCC. You just hold it in your log, you hold it to your station, and if they knock on the door, you can present it. That went into effect in May. The FCC established $35 for fees for licensing for applications. That was a kind of an interesting story. A lot of being in the Washington, D.C. area, and I live about 25 miles south of Washington, D.C. in the Piscataway National Park. We're right on the Potomac River across from Mount Vernon, Virginia. We protect the view from Mount Vernon, Virginia, George and Martha Washington's home, and keep it the way it originally was in the colonial days. And being in the Washington, D.C. area, a lot of really neat things have happened over the years that we've been privileged to be a part of or be aware of. And one of those was back in about 1985, 86, the FCC was tasked by Congress to collect fees for licensing. And of course, they get big bucks out of the broadcast folks, but this included virtually everybody. And a friend of mine in Annapolis, Maryland, he's now retired, he worked on Capitol Hill with another ham, and the other ham was going to go meet with the FCC that afternoon. And so as they finished lunch, his friend said, "Hey, is there anything you need at the FCC? I'm heading over there. I'll take care of it." And he jokingly said, "Hey, how about getting us exempt from the licensing fees at the FCC?" And his friend jokingly said, "Yeah, I'll take care of that." Well, he came back a little after 5 o'clock in the afternoon, and he had taken care of it. We got exempted from FCC fees back in the mid-'80s. Only one problem. It was never codified. It was never put in writing. It was a handshake deal. Now, guess what? From the mid-'80s to now, those folks either retired or died that made the agreement, and nobody has it in writing. So it was recognized that amateur radio, along with other services, needed to pony up. The FCC just recently moved their headquarters to a new facility, and it was during the pandemic that they moved, and all the staff were home. But to move the FCC from the headquarters over in L'Enfant Plaza to the new headquarters behind Union Station in Washington, D.C. off of Capitol Hill, it cost $16.5 million for that move. Guess how much money they had allocated for that move? You guessed it, absolutely zero. So you could see the need for some cash in the piggy bank. And of course, all the attention here goes to the auctions and the billions of dollars they pull in with auctions around the country. So anyway, we got caught in the whirlybird. We did negotiate with the FCC. We were able to reduce it. Originally, you remember how much they were asking? $50. $50 every time you got a license or renewed. And that's for a 10-year license. At one time when I got licensed over 50 years ago, we had to pay for our licenses at that time. And that was a much shorter period. And so you still got the 10-year license. It is $35. This was seen to possibly be an impediment to new hams, to youth getting licensed. Down in Florida, for example, there's a scout camp that they have 350 Boy Scouts that come through every year. They go through an amateur radio course. It's called the Radio Communications Merit Badge. There are two sides of it, and one half of it, if they select that side, is amateur radio. You basically have a ham radio license almost if you take that. And that's what they work with these youth, with the scouts. And the $35 was considered possibly an impediment for many of these scouts. So sure enough, the board of directors worked together. We compromised. And for youth that are under the age of 18, for the first time they take their license test, we'll cover the $35 for them. It'll be waived, and they do not have to pay the $35. Just trying to help us. As I mentioned, quite often I got licensed when I was very young, and when I'd go to a radio club meeting, I was the youngest person there. And for many, many years, when I went to a radio club meeting, I was the youngest person there. And quite often now, when I go to some of these luncheons, I'm still the youngest person there. So we need to work on some youth. If we don't change something in 20 years, what's amateur radio going to be doing? Who are you going to talk to in 20 years from now? So we're really putting an emphasis on youth. We have technician licensing courses available on ARRL's YouTube channel. We've got a learning center that has over 50 courses. David Kessler has licensed the videos and with the Aries training courses. And there are 4 new courses currently under development. It's really kind of a neat happening. Also want to mention the ARRL Foundation. Anybody heard of the ARRL Foundation? Okay, we got a couple. The ARRL Foundation was formed back in the 70s, late 60s, early 70s. When AMSAT got up and going, they wanted to build satellites, and they had no way to finance a satellite program. So a separate organization from the American Radio Relay League was founded, hence the foundation, the ARRL Foundation. And it was basically formed to finance AMSAT. Well, in the 80s, it kind of morphed, and when it sort of morphed into a scholarship fund and some club grants. And people, if somebody would die or if a club wanted to memorialize, they would develop a scholarship in somebody's name or in the club's name. And so we had scholarships that we administer in addition to some small club grants. These grants are usually $1,000, $2,000, $3,000. We fast forward. The foundation today is very, very active. I sit on the board. I'm a director on the ARRL Foundation. It's all volunteer labor. It's a labor of love. We have 2 main subcommittees. One is the scholarship committee that I serve on, and deserving candidates can receive college scholarships. They have to apply every fall, and then we go over the list and we select the winners and award the scholarships. Most of these scholarships were from $500 up to about $2,000. We had a couple that were $5,000. And that was great back in the 70s and 80s, but you could imagine how far a $1,000 or $500 scholarship would take you into college today. So the ARDC, the Amateur Radio Digital Communications Group, originally back when the internet started, these things called IP addresses, Internet Protocol addresses, were out commodity. And we came up with an amateur bank of these IP addresses that were set aside just for hams, for AMPRNet. And these were very rarely used. Only a few thousand were actually used. Was the world's using IP addresses. Every device in here that you have and everything at home has an IP address. They're running out of addresses. So Amazon, back to this group, they got together and they formed a nonprofit organization. They controlled the bank of these IP addresses. And out in California, they very legally put together this group to handle these addresses. And Amazon came to them and said, hey, we understand you've got some addresses. Yeah. Well, I forget how many million addresses they need. It was a block of addresses. There's still plenty left. But they purchased them for over $100 million. $105 million Amazon paid this group. This group took the money. It's a nonprofit. They invested it. And they cannot make a profit. So they want to bolster amateur radio, the future of amateur radio. So they offered grants for amateur radio projects to better amateur radio, for the future of amateur radio. Well, sure enough, have you ever tried to give away money? The IRS came out and said, hey, this year you need to give away $7.5 million. How do you give away $7.5 million? Hey, I'll take some. It is a tremendous task, and they were handling the organization. It was well beyond them. They did some grant. So sure enough, the ARRL Foundation, the scholarship fund, got a grant for $950,000 for scholarships this year, and the actual grant side of the ARRL Foundation went out and it requested a grant for $500,000, and they were both awarded. And so I serve on the scholarship committee. Between October 1st to December 31st, we take applications, and we had stacks of applications for scholarships this year. And what was kind of neat was we had 37 scholarships that were from $10,000 to $25,000 in addition to the smaller scholarships. And we went through for the big, we call them the big scholarships. We actually interviewed the candidates. And one of the interviews I interviewed last year also, and again this year. She lives in Florida. She's 14 years old. She's an extra class ham. She's very active in amateur radio. And she's in the second year of college, 14 years old. Can you say Dookie Hazard, MD? Yeah, just a phenomenal. And what was neat was when we went through these interviews, these folks are so poised. They know exactly where they're going. And we take and rate them based on these interviews for the awards. And we awarded this year over $950,000 in college scholarships to deserving candidates. It's really fantastic. This year there were 125 or 129 requests for grants for clubs. These grants were for anywhere up to $25,000. Anything over $25,000, you go directly to ARDC, and there have been a couple of those also. So this year, the grants committee went through, and they just awarded, and they're cutting checks right now. They have a bunch of grants. What's the amount this year? Was it $550,000 so far? They took, I'm sorry, 275. They took the grant block and broke it in two halves. The first block just finished, and they're just opening the second grant block. And if you go on the ARRL website, it'll tell you how to apply for the funds. I understand the club here, thank goodness, received an incredible grant, just fantastic for the club station that was demolished a short time ago, and it's creeping back. Now it can jog. Yes.
John Pierce is the gentleman who wrote the grants.
Good work. Yeah, I understand it was an excellent proposal. Yeah, they received over 125 proposals for over $1 million a request. So it's been a big job. So we're opening the grants again for the second half of the year, and also October 1st, the scholarships will open. The scholarships will happen, And candidates can go right online. We're using a company called Kaleidoscope. They handle college scholarships. And they go right online and take and fill in some questions. That comes to us in a scholarship committee. And we look forward to awarding those. We'll probably close, we will close the window midnight, December 31st, and we'll evaluate those. And usually about April or May, we'll make the notifications in time that they can make their plans for the next college year. Just to share a couple things that we're doing for you, the membership. We have some really kind of neat operations that are going on behind the scenes. You don't hear much of them, but folks are really working hard. We have an Amateur Radio Legal and Defense Assistance Fund committee that works hard, and Bob has worked with them. When you have antenna problems or other legal problems, they work with you. We have the high-frequency band planning groups. We have a very active historical committee, the RF safety committee, electromagnetic compatibility committee. We have a public relations committee, amateur radio direction finding, of course, a logbook of the world committee. Anybody using logbook of the world? We're getting ready to redo logbook of the world 2.0. It's going to be great. It has reached its life's end, so we're going to redo it, and it's going to be super duper. We have a contest advisory committee, DXCC advisory committee, an ARRL committee for the space program, for the space station, and a legal instruction review committee. So these are just a few things that we do behind the scenes. A couple benefits. Everybody knows about QST magazine. We have several magazines that are available. You can select. A lot of technicians thought that the QST was too high a level technically, and they can take and subscribe to only AIR magazine in lieu of QST. We also have a QEX, which is Experimenter's highly technical magazine, and the NCJ, the National Contest Journal, that's available. And what's really cool is, whichever magazine you decide to receive, whether it's QST or only AIR magazine, what's really neat is you can go online as a member benefit, and you can download the current, any of these magazines you can digitally download and read. They're available to you online. You can also have an archive and go back to QSTs, back to the beginning, and download any QST. Look for articles and things. You can take a look for equipment reviews that have been done by the lab. So it's really kind of a neat benefit. So where does it all happen? We've got emergency communications that's going strong. ARRL is basically run by your field organization. And your field organization is organized section by section. Here in the Southern New Jersey section, Tom is your section manager. You're very fortunate to have such a competent individual. He has a lot of responsibility. In fact, he's responsible for 7 primary areas of amateur radio, from clubs, emergency communications, education, VEs, public relations, and I probably left several out, but he appoints individuals to delegate the responsibility to. And I'm going to tell you, in the ARRL structure, I've been in office for, I started as a section manager. I actually had many appointments in the field organization, but I was a section manager in the Maryland, D.C. section, vice director for 10 years, and I've been the director ever since. I've been in office, elected office for over 20 years. The most difficult job in ARRL is as section manager. He needs your support. Give him your support. He needs it. And of course, they handle government relations and NTS and a whole lot of neat things. There's also a weekly ARRL newsletter that's available as a member. You can sign up, also sign up for your section and division bulletins right on the ARRL website. You can sign up for it. And we have an outgoing QSL service, continuing education. There's a regulatory and information branch where you can check and on legal questions that you have related to amateur radio, and of course, public relations for amateur radio. So anyway, there's many, many contests that are sponsored throughout the year by the league. Anybody go to field day? I know it's not a contest. Then why do they list it in the contest scores in QST? Okay. Yeah, it's really great. Okay, I want to take just a moment. Bob, you may want to mention HOA, and then I want to take the remainder of the time and let Tom come up and tell you what's happening in this section here. Give us an update.
Sure.
Thank you, Bob.
I'll take just a couple of minutes. I don't have death by PowerPoint either. So everyone here is a believer because you're here at an ARRL forum, and I'll bet you almost all of you are ARRL members. So I'm preaching to the choir, aren't I? I can boil down the details of what Tom talked to you about into three or four threats to amateur radio, which is a reason that the ARRL is necessary to support the activity that we all love. Amateur radio has been a way of life for me since, January 1967 I was licensed, and I've been active ever since. We have a number of threats. Tom touched on some of them. They threaten our activity, our hobby, if you will, and that is, some of them you're familiar with. Antenna restrictions. Can't have an antenna, can't be on the air. Spectrum, which is vying with the antenna restrictions for first place on my list of threats. You all see this, you all watch the news, you hear about spectrum auctions. They now talk about spectrum in terms of billions, with a B, billions of dollars. Who would have thought that our 3 gigahertz band, that was lost. We're still fighting for a little sliver. I want to see if we can keep a little patch to be able to do things with, but we lost most of it to what? Commercial activities, of course, but that includes the Citizens Broadband Radio Service. That's right, CB. You can't make this stuff up. Everybody aware of that? That it's gone to the Citizens Broadband Radio Service at 3 gigahertz? I'm surprised. A lot of people say, no, it's not. CB, it's 11 meters. We lost 11 meters in the 60s, or 50s. Get over it. That's not what we're talking about. So you see what's happening. Direct Networks was the winning bidder for our 3 gigahertz band and paid billions for the right to have it all over the country to deliver data services. I don't know if they're going to get into voice services, but it all converges into data anyway, so I'm sure they can. But they're building out in my area in eastern Pennsylvania. I work on leases and things of that sort for property owners, typically firehouses and people that have cell towers. I act as pro bono counsel, and we're seeing a lot of applications by Direct Network to build out 3 gigahertz. So we lost that band. They're looking at 5. You've seen this. We're secondary there, but they're looking at putting incompatible services on that frequency and much of the higher frequencies. And I know people say, I don't talk there anyway. That's up in the nosebleed section of the bleachers, and I ain't going to be up there. Well, they said that about, other bands, 400, 450, our 420 to 450 band, and some of the other bands we have. There was a threat to 2 meters. Remember a couple years ago? People kind of ignored this, but there was I see some head shaking. In 2 meters, they wanted 2 megahertz for aircraft services for safety. They said it's much more important than the hams. We love hams. Aircraft safety is more important. I think France still has that on the agenda for 2023. They want to take the non-international band, which is 146 to 148. 144 to 146 is international, including 146 to 144 to 146 is international. Then our repeater segment, largely repeaters, is just the United States and Canada and Mexico. Many countries don't have a 4 megahertz 2 meter band, but they're looking at taking that. So my point here is that we need somebody to represent us. And all I can see right now is the ARRL. We're 150-some thousand strong, and we have money because of your membership and the ads that we put in the magazines nobody likes. Too many ads. Well, that's what pays for all the stuff you're hearing about and the people up in Newington that work for you. Directors, vice directors, section managers, we're all volunteers. We have to get elected, but we don't serve for any kind of pay, but we need money to run headquarters, to do the kinds of things that are necessary to prevent direct network from taking our 24 gigahertz band and all the other stuff. Samsung has been testing at 60 gigahertz. We have a band up there, by the way, for the urban canyons can use that kind of microwave frequency very easily, apparently, for cellular if you have something every block, which you can do in cities. So we need to be on the lookout for that. And even some of our lower frequencies occasionally are threatened because commercial services now see with digital communications they can use those frequencies for other than voice, which they weren't interested in, except for marine and some international aircraft. That's what the ARRL does, and that's the threats that we address. Spectrum, antennas, and I will get to antennas in a second. I can leave some room for Tom. The next one is RFI. How many people here have been plagued by radio frequency interference on one or more bands? I got some hands. I have too. And I deal with the FCC as volunteer counsel. I talk with Laura Smith frequently out in Gettysburg. Sometimes she calls me with questions, and I take that as a compliment. But I work with her, and it's getting worse and worse. And that's going to be a threat to our activities because if you can't hear anything, you can have a great antenna, right? You can have spectrum that's not threatened, lots of room on the dial. And then you have an S9 noise level everywhere. Boy, that'll ruin your day. So that's something that we fight against, too. We have a great RFI lab. The ARRL is busy with having people on committees for the IEEE, the Institute of Electrical and Electronic Engineers. I've been a member of that for many years as a EE graduate. We have 3 guys. Tom, yes, we do. That's right. That's more than I thought, actually. I thought we had 2. We have 3 of the employees from ARRL that got their way on to RFI committees, IEEE standard-setting committees. That's important. Yes? 3 minutes? Okay. How many guys do we have besides the RF labs on the committee, IEEE committee? We have the whole flock of them. It's more than 3 then. And then last, of course, we have problems with encroachment on our spectrums by unlicensed operators. We're getting a lot of that in the greater Philadelphia area. How many of you have run into that on one or more repeaters? And I don't mean just poor operators that are licensed, but I mean people that are unlicensed to get on and either harass or pretend or they bootleg. I'm getting more and more of that I'm seeing as a control operator for a lot of wide area repeaters, including N3KZ that I manage. So for HOA, and by the way, I'll stick around afterwards if you have specific questions, because we'd all like to take your specific questions. But for HOA, we are on the brink of another breakthrough. We have submitted some much improved legislation that will, if passed, and that's what we're working on, will allow you to have some antennas depending on where you are in an HOA. If you're in a townhouse, if you're in a separate single-family dwelling, you may have more rights because you may own a portion of a backyard. If you're in a condominium, you may have some rights to have it outside your condo, at least on your own railing or deck, because lots of HOAs don't allow that at all. They just don't want to see any of that. They don't want any RF operation. Now, the reason the last one was pulled, because I still get a lot of complaints about that, is, in my view, it was, if it had passed, we would have less rights than we would have without it. There's a long story that I don't have time to get into about why that happened. The people who allowed that to happen are no longer with the ARRL. So let me wrap it up and introduce Tom for some comments, and then I will stick around, and if we have time, we'll field questions from all of you. Tom? Never give a lawyer a microphone. He'll talk forever. So.
Thanks, Bob, and thanks, Tom, for your comments earlier. For Southern New Jersey, first I'd like to thank the Gloucester County Amateur Radio Club for hosting our Southern New Jersey Section Convention. You guys do a fantastic job every year. I wish the weather would cooperate a little bit more, but we'll always be back again next year, so we look forward to that. Thanks again for all the guys in the club and all that you do. And again, congratulations to Ron on his award, and congratulations to the club for their grant that they did. They're the only one in Southern New Jersey that was able to get it. We have a couple of events coming up in Southern New Jersey this month, actually, and in the beginning of October. First, in about 2 weeks, there's the Bike-a-thon from Philadelphia to the Shore. So if anybody's interested in that, they still have some openings for people to participate in that. The MS 5000, I think, is the right name of it. So if you're interested in participating, whether it's for a day or not, check that out. On October 1st, we're going to have our Southern New Jersey Simulated Emergency Test. If you're a member of an Aries club or in Gloucester County, I think Aries is part of the Gloucester County Club, get a hold of your Aries coordinator for your emergency coordinator for your area, for your county, and see what you can do to participate. It's real simple messages going from one place to another over 2 meter, 440, or if there's some people are going to be doing WinLink and some other kind of messages, but they're simple. It's not hard to learn, but get involved in your emergency group and get out there it's only in the morning. It's October 1st from 8 in the morning till about noon, and it's really all you got to do. And it's not hard. You can use an HT. If you can hit the repeater, you're in good shape. And that's the activities that are coming up in Southern New Jersey between now and October. I know there's a lot of clubs that are involved with different other events locally. Keep up the good work. Everybody's been coming out to meetings. I know some clubs have meetings that are both Zoom meetings and club meetings, so you can't miss one. I know up in the Delaware Valley Club, they have a Zoom meeting during the regular meeting, so if for some reason you can't make the meeting, you can still watch it online and see it. I think Gloucester County is doing the same thing, so that's great. Get out. The last thing really that I kind of talk to about everybody is get on the air every day. If you can get on there and make one contact a day, whether it's on HF or get on your 2 meter repeater, and just put your call out there for a little bit and get on the radio and use your radios and use your stuff. Please get on the air as often as you can and get your call out there and use your hobby. And that's all I got. I don't know if you want to do questions and answers, or if you have any questions, we'll bring Tom and Bob back up.
Somebody's got to have a question. 5 minutes. Okay, 5 minutes.
Yeah, 5 minutes. And yeah, we'll be available afterwards, out and away, so we don't disturb Ron's talk. I want to sneak back in and catch you, find out what the genius is working on. Questions?
I understand that the ARRL is operating at about a $1 million deficit per year, and if it wasn't for endowments, it might really be in trouble. Is there some sort of plan to try to get away from endowments, and how can the membership help to maybe close that gap, or is it where you got to start severing employees up in Connecticut, or?
Yeah, thank you for your question. It's an interesting question. And yeah, just this last year, we were at about a $1 million deficit. The league operates in a $16.5 million a year budget. So $1 million is significant. In this case, we were able to cut things to the bone. We cut back on several programs that were considered surplus. But what we've basically done is we've gotten it down to $500,000 right now. Now, we have reserves of about $48 million, so we're not going to fade away. But we're working on lowering that deficit. We actually have 3 sources of income. It's like a three-legged milking stool. We have membership dues that cover a third. We have printing and books and that we sell, things that we sell in the store, and then we have donations that take up that fill in the rest. In just a recent past here, if you haven't noticed, the printing business is going south quickly. Everything's going digital, and books aren't selling quite as well. But we're working on basically closing that. We've got a committee right now that's working on developing ways to improve the financial situation. But the league's not going anywhere.
Does that answer your question?
Yes. Thank you.
Any
Questions?
we need some hard questions,
Yeah.
I'm going to go home sad somebody doesn't give me a hard question. Come on. I'm glad to hear that, because that tells us that you're informed.
Yeah, we'll be outside afterwards, and thanks for your attention here today. If there's anything we can do for you, please let us know. We're page 7 of QST Magazine. Get in touch with us.
Yeah, that's a good point. Make sure you do call. People say, we don't want to bother you, it's just a single member. No, that's not how we work. And we're elected by all of you. Now, we're happy to answer your questions. Our telephone numbers are in QST every month for a reason. I take calls during the day or at night, so does Tom, and even during work. The staff up front knows that if somebody calls and they'll ask you, what's this in reference to? Just say ham radio, or I'm an ARRL member. They know. They'll put the call through. If you're just somebody selling law books, you'll never get a call back. So do that, and some of you have done that. I'll talk to you, whether it's a legal question, some of the things I discuss, or a question about ARRL. You call Tom on some things. I back him up if he's not available, or if you have a question specifically within my expertise, call me. And if I'm not immediately available, you can bet that I'll call you back. Just tell them when. When's a good time for you. That can be at night, weekends, or during the day. I'm at the office 9 to 5.